dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed.
In the 1950s, South Korea was one of the poorest countries on earth. Not poor by today's standards, poor enough that people were eating grass to survive. Somehow this broken nation became a technological superpower in just one generation. Today South Korea builds its chips, ships and brands dominating modern culture. So how did a country with nothing became one of the richest nations on earth? Let's understand it. To understand Korea's rise, you have to understand what it was rising from. For 35 years, from 1910 to 1945, Korea didn't exist as a country. Japan had colonized it, banned the Korean language in schools, erased Korean names from official records, forced Koreans into the labor factories and mines. When Japan surrendered in World War II, Korea was freed. But it was stripped of everything. Then the Cold War arrived. America and Soviet Union split the peninsula into two. North got the communist regime, South got a US-backed government. And then in 1950, a war broke out between them. The Korean War lasted 3 years, 5 million people died, Seoul, the capital, changed hands 4 times, cities were bombed flat, and where the armistice was signed in 1953, nobody wanted South Korea's chances. Almost all of Korea's industry, like mines, factories, hydroelectric power plants, all are in the north. The south got the rice paddies, the north got everything else. And one time the New York Times reporter visited South Korea in 1961 and wrote, and I want you to understand it, that South Korea, the poorer half of one of the poorest countries in the world, is trying to exist as a nation with too many people and too few resources. No one knows the answers to the country's economy woes. In 1961, a young army general, frustrated, furious at watching his country rot, decided he had enough, and his name was Park Chung-hee. Park Chung-hee seized power in military coup in 1961. He was a dictator, no question about that. He imprisoned political opponents, suppressed labor unions, ran elections that were neither free nor fair, but he also did something extraordinary. He looked at Korea, a country with no natural resources, no capital, no industry, and decided that the only way out was to become a factory of the world. His quote says everything about his philosophy. For poor people like Koreans on the verge of near starvation, economics take precedence over politics. Enforcing democracy is meaningless. You can disagree with that, I disagree with that, many Koreans still do. But what he built on back of that belief was unlike anything the world had ever seen.
When President Park Chung-hee came into power in 1963, his primary focus was on economic resurgence. And he believed that Korea should have a strong economy, an independent economy, and also an economy in which the military could build up power. North Korea was still a threat. And to counter that threat, North Korea, of course, had the ROK alliance, which was very important, actually, for Korea's economic development as well, because it provided a security space. South Korea didn't have to be totally distracted for self-defense. Rather, it could have the alliance relationship and turn its attention to the economy. So Park Chung-hee's wanted to have an independent economy, and he wanted the economy strong enough so that it had military strength as well.
Here's how Park's system worked. He picked a handful of powerful family-run business groups and essentially said, I will give you everything. Cheap loans, governmental contracts, protection from foreign competition, but in return, you will export and you will build and you will grow.
Now, the first decade of Korea's economic history, post-war economic history, was a very aid-dependent economy. Park Chung-hee wasn't happy with that. he went to Washington on a state visit, Washington, D.C. in 1965, and there he renegotiated the composition of U.S. aid. U.S. aid was running about $200 million a year, which was a lot of money back then. And he shifted the composition of the aid from grants, development assistance, to development loans. And the development loans could be used sectorial for the areas, the sectors in which Park Chung-hee thought was important to develop the economy. So that was, I think, a really big shift in policy.
By the early 1970s, South Korea was growing at nearly 15% a year. Not 7 or 8%, 15%. For your understanding, if India grew at 15% a decade, we would add the equivalent of Germany's entire economy. Every decade, Korea moved up the value chain deliberately, not by accident, by policy. In 1960, they exported wigs and textiles. In 1970s, they built the world's largest ships. In the 80s, they made cars, and in the 90s, they made semiconductors. In 2000s, they conquered the smartphones, and 2010s, they conquered the global culture. Each step was planned, funded, and executed. This was not the invisible hand of the market. This was the very visible fist of the state, pointed outward at the world. By mid-1990s, Korea had made it. It was a developed economy. Its companies were global brands, its people were prosperous, and then in 1997, everything collapsed. You know what happened? The Asian financial crisis swept through the region like a tsunami.
Fearful from the start, and they were right. In the end, the Hang Seng Index fell almost 400 points. It was the worst close in 2 years.
The Japanese economy, 15% of global GDP, 70% of East Asian GDP, excluding Australia and New Zealand. It's as big as core Europe. If the Japanese economy continues to spiral downwards, nobody escapes, and certainly nobody in Asia escapes. It makes recovery from this depression as it now is in this part of the world almost impossible.
The Korean won lost half of its value in weeks. Banks ran out of money. Companies that had borrowed massively to fund expansion suddenly couldn't repay their loans. The IMF arrived with a $58 billion bailout. Korea treated the crisis as a reset button. Korean citizens, ordinary people, voluntarily bought their gold, jewelry, their wedding rings to government collection centers to help the country pay their debt. Over 3.5 million people participated, and it raised hundreds of millions of dollars. After the 1997 crisis, the Korean government did something that sounds almost absurd. It decided to treat its entertainment industry, music, films, TV shows, the same way it treated its steel industry.
So the government took cultural identity and turned it into an exportable commodity. And Hallyu was born. Hallyu refers to the Korean wave. The phenomenal growth of Korean pop culture, from K-pop to K-beauty, film to food. Today, culture is one of South Korea's largest exports. It has helped the nation become Asia's fourth biggest economy and cemented its credentials as a cultural superpower.
And in 2012, you heard the song.
Oppan Gangnam Style.
It created history and reached 1 billion views on YouTube. In 2020, Parasite became the first non-English film to win the Oscar for Best Picture. In 2021, Squid Game became the Netflix most watched show of all time. But before we conclude that Korea found the perfect formula, there is a bill that comes with all of this, and it's enormous. South Korea has the lowest birth rate of any country on earth, 0.72 children per woman. The replacement rate is 2.1. At this rate, Korea's population will halve within the decades.
The country faces a population crisis, and it is only deepening. With falling birth rates, its population has shrunk for the fourth consecutive year. The country now faces a national extinction. That's what the government is calling it, a national extinction. Here's why South Korea has a population, South Korea has a population of 51 million people. If low fertility persists, the population will fall to 36 million by 2072. That's a drop of 30%, and it will halve by the end of the century, the year 2100.
So, yeah, there are problems, but what do we actually learn from Korea? That it wasn't luck, that it wasn't geography, it wasn't culture in some mystical sense. it was decisions, specific, deliberate, sometimes brutal decisions about which industries to build, how to fund them, how to educate people for them, and how to force those industries to compete with the world rather than hide from it. If you like these kind of deep dives and case studies, you have to do one thing, that is subscribe, and subscribe. Thank you for sticking till the end. If you want to say anything, if you want to give any feedback, please let me know in the comment box. I'll be very happy to give a reply to you. And let's see in the next video.